Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.
Revolution.
First, what is a revolution?
Revolution is the solution, hey.
The motive of a revolution.
Well, now,
The objective of a revolution.
we televised.
And the result of a revolution. And the methods used in a revolution.
I know you know. Put my gun away. Never gonna put my gun away. Put my gun away. See that might be better run away.
This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression.
Hello, Internet. Hope everybody is having a fantastic Sunday evening. Glad you could be here. Steve's running a little bit behind, so we're going to get started and just check in with the chat and see how everybody's doing first. But yeah, as you guys know, we have a California gubernatorial race. It's such a fun word to say. Coming up in, we got the primaries coming up in what? April? June? I don't even know the date, but we've got, I don't know, 12 Democrats running, and we've got multiple Republicans running, but there's really only two that are, making any headway, and that's Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton. And tonight, Steve Hilton was so gracious to join us. Again, he's running a little bit behind, but we're just gonna get started here. So, I've been saying for months now that in order to get past the jungle primary, and if you guys don't know, the jungle primary in California is where the top two vote getters move on. So you could end up with two Democrats. In theory, you could end up with two Republicans. And a lot of people are speculating that that can happen. I think there's zero chance of it whatsoever. So since the Democrat field is spread so thin, I think the only way for a Republican to actually be on the general election ticket is for one of them to drop out and endorse the other one. I don't necessarily see anybody doing that, but we'll see. And looks like Steve is with us. I'm going to bring him up and see if we got audio and everything.
How are you doing?
How we doing, Steve?
I'm great. Have I frozen? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's probably just StreamYard.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Can you see? It looks frozen on my end, but if it's okay for you.
No, it's frozen on my end too, but I can hear you fine. I don't know if you want to jump out and then jump back in.
Yeah, very strange. Okay, thank you. Sorry to be a bit late. California Post called asking me for a quote on something with deadlines, so I was sorry about. I said 5 minutes. It was.
No worries. I'm just happy you came on my tiny little show. So check him in the chat here. Pete Grabber, TNHSP. Nice to see you. Oh, that's Tracy. All right, here's Steve. All right, Steve, there you are again. Yeah, you're still frozen. You got your right camera selected. I mean, you're a veteran podcaster, so I'm sure you're familiar with StreamYard.
Mic, camera, here we go. Yeah. Try this. Better. Okay, good.
Oh, there we go. All right, nice to see you. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm sorry, Grant. I'm sorry it was a little longer than 5 minutes. The California Post called for a comment on something, and they were on deadline, so I had to quickly send them a quote.
No problem.
Here we are. Okay.
What was it, if I might ask?
Oh, they do just a little story. They're doing a story on schools, especially in LA, where their kids are being let out in order to participate in anti-ICE protests.
Yep, I'm seeing that. And actually, I mean, that might be a good place to start. I got my friend Tracy in here, and she's head of the California Parents Union, and she.
Oh wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, she's awesome. And she is definitely curious to know your stance on parental rights.
Very good, very good. Can you just tell me, because it's the first time we're doing the show, what's the deal? How does it work? What are we, how long and all that?
So I was hoping you could go an hour. I have a ton of questions that I want to ask you. So it's going to be sort of rapid fire.
Sure.
I'm going to try not to spend too much time on each topic, but I also want it to be conversational. So
got it. Okay.
I won't I won't bombard you with anything that you're probably not expecting. So
I'm happy. Whatever you want. All yours.
awesome. And I mean, and that's sort of the type of attitude I think California's looking for. Just an open book, ask me whatever, and I'll give you my honest opinion.
Exactly.
And that's what I find sort of refreshing about you. So as I said, Tracy's head of the California Parents Union. She really wants to talk about like parental rights type stuff, meaning, there's homeschooling, there's all of this gender affirming care crap that's going on.
Yeah.
And,
Well, where do you want me to start?
Well, I mean, just go ahead and shoot whatever.
So, I mean, I'll just, strongly yes, for parental rights, is the sort of starting point on everything from the forced vaccinations during the pandemic, which was so infuriating and totally outrageous, given that there was no justification for that whatsoever on any kind of medical or public health grounds. We can get into the details of that, but that's an example of how they've just taken away parents' rights. Obviously, just so that everyone is clear, I'm a parent. I've never believed that you have to be a parent in order to be in favor of parents' rights, but I happen to be a parent of two teenage boys, and I just think that the way that these Democrats and the left generally increasingly see education as part of a political project. You can trace it right back to I remember did a whole piece on this when I hosted my Fox News show, The Origins of Wokeism. And you take it right back to over 100 years ago, the Marxists in the Frankfurt School, and they were trying to figure out why the Marxist revolution hadn't taken hold everywhere, just as Marx had predicted. The logic of capitalism would make these capitalist systems collapse, and they had this view that actually it's all these other institutions, non-economic ones, that were perpetuating the system that they didn't like, the bourgeoisie and all the rest of it, and capitalism, and chief among them was the family, and so there's a real intellectual heritage to this. It's not come out of nowhere. For over a century, they've been pushing forward this idea that the family stands in the way of their political project, and now you're seeing that come to fruition. And you see it right here in California, and you see it in so many different ways. The opposition to any kind of movement towards school choice, including Gavin Newsom refusing to participate in this new federal school choice program that the One Big Beautiful Bill introduced, etc. I mean, we can go on and on. I've long been an advocate for school choice, which is obviously one aspect of parental rights, and we can get into the policy areas of that. I think it's going to be very difficult to introduce that as governor. I'll certainly do my best to move in that direction. Charter schools are probably the best, immediate and deliverable step in that direction. And actually, that whole idea of putting power in people's hands has been really the through line of my work, pretty much all my career. From the businesses that I've started to the books I've written, the policy and the policy priorities I've had and the way I've tried to implement them, whether I was working back in the day in the UK government or here in California. How do you get more power in people's hands? How do you decentralize power from centralized bureaucracies and put them directly in the hands of people? Parents' rights are a huge part of that. Just quickly on gender affirming care, there's something so insidious about that phrase.
Right.
And I think we have to just not accept that phrase. I mean, it's just so Orwellian. And I think one of the simplest ways of capturing it is, imagine if we applied that in other areas of health care, right? And you go to cancer affirming care or whatever. It's like, imagine you go to the doctor and the expectation is that the doctor affirms what you say, right? That you go in there's I think I've got this problem, whatever, and we're insisting that the doctor affirms what you think, rather than giving you a professional clinical judgment. It's ridiculous, completely ridiculous. And that was the sort of basis of, I think, the most thorough investigation into all of this, which was actually done, ironically enough, by the healthcare system that the left completely reveres, which is the UK National Health Service, where they did a 2-year study, the Cass review, Hilary Cass, who did a deep investigation into all of this in the UK, and came to the conclusion that that it was totally unacceptable, should be completely banished from the healthcare system, that children should not be treated this way, that actually the role of medical professionals should be to, if a child comes in and whatever, presents with gender dysphoria, whatever, then you treat it as a mental health issue that needs to be handled sensitively, compassionately, all of those things. But you absolutely don't affirm what they say. And you certainly don't go toward any at all towards irreversible altering of your body. And so the UK National Health Service, the social, the dream for Bernie Sanders and AOC, what they want to see here, single payer, they've banned it in the UK. So,
right.
Sorry, long answer, but very important subjects.
It's okay. Because California is directly attacking the family unit with laws that they're passing. Like, if a child presents that they believe that they're of the other gender, they actually made it illegal for teachers to tell the parents. It's
disgusting. It's completely disgusting. And you just think, what on earth? How have we even gotten to this point? It's so crazy. I mean, I remember the first time I really saw how evil this was and how cynical and insidious, and all these kinds of words I think are appropriate. I remember many years ago on my podcast, I had a conversation with Harmeet Dillon, long before she was in the Justice Department, as she is now, doing a great job for the president. And she had a case from her legal, organization took on a case for a girl that had had irreversible surgery as a direct result of one of these gender clinics that were run in the school. And I remember Harmeet telling me the most sick thing about this was that it was all pushed by the teacher unions, and there was information that was sent from the teacher union head, the California Teachers Association, whatever it was. Maybe it was one of the other teacher unions, so I'm not saying it was them, but a teacher union in California distributed materials to their schools, to their members in the schools, explicitly saying that you should run these gender workshops and gender clinics for children, and you should do it in the lunch break, because if you did it after school, the parents would have to be told because they're not being, they're being picked up an hour later, whatever. So they're literally being told to hide it.
Right. It's a direct attack on the family
and that's what initiates it. So they push it with these workshops that they set up, and then they hide it from the parents. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
this is where we are.
It's insidious. And then there's, sort of my wheelhouse. I'm a distance runner, cross country coach, and I grew up playing sports, and I was coaching cross country with another teacher in the San Lorenzo Valley School District here. I won't say her name, put her on blast, but I was told when I first came in that, hey, you might have a they, them on your team. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And they were like, well, you might have like a boy that identifies as a girl. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do this then. I'm not going to coach. I'm doing this for free anyway. And you get the counter argument to that is always, oh, well, there's so few biological boys that identify as girls and want to compete that it's not that big of a deal. No, it's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal
because you have, yes, it's so few boys that are going to dominate all of the other girls.
But it's happening I keep hearing this, and they used to say this, a couple of years ago, it was really exploding as an issue, and say, oh, there were 9 in the whole country. They had some bullshit, stat. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Oh, you could say whatever you want.
Stat like that they used to kind of wheel out. And then you say, well, why is it then that there was, almost every week there's a story from somewhere of one of these things happening? If it's just 9 people in the house, it's ridiculous. And you've got girls now in California, very common story, that girls are changing in cars because they don't want to use the changing rooms, because you've got boys, biological boys going in the changing rooms, all of these things. It's just extraordinary that we've, and the people who've let this happen, not just let it happen, encouraged it, and still defend it to this day, are these people who just this week, we saw it from the insane press conference with Gavin Newsom and his wife going on about the war on women, accusing the Republicans of President Trump of the war on women. And they are the ones pushing this. It's absolutely, and nobody pushes back. And it's amazing that no one calls them on that point. So how dare you position yourselves as the champions of women and gender equality and women's rights when you're letting this happen?
Right. And this is just, I mean, the tip of the iceberg. Again, we could do a whole episode just
Can I
on
just
this.
say one thing? It's very important. I'm very happy to talk about all these things and comment on them. But I also do want to say, this is what I will do about it, because I'm a candidate now, not a commentator. And I've thought very hard about this, and just specifically on this issue of the the boys, and girls' sports, locker rooms, all that. So that goes back to a law that was passed in 2013 in California. It's been a long time with us now, AB 1266. And so that is the law in California. And so to undo that, that's going to take some work. But I've done the work to figure out how we do that. And in fact, on my team, I've got one of Governor Wilson's top lawyers, and we've been working through many of these issues. And the governor has the power to initiate the overturning of a law that violates the state constitution. And so you've got to find grounds to overturn these laws, and then you can do it. And by the way, you can do it even if the Attorney General is from another party. You can instruct them to do that. And I'm hoping, of course, that the Attorney General will be my running mate, Michael Gates. I'm putting together a team. We can perhaps get into that later, which has never been done before by anyone running for governor. But so I'm planning to have with me a strong ally in all of these matters. But still, what you can do is overturn. You can begin the process of overturning a law that violates the state constitution. This particular one on biological boys and girls sports and so on, we think it violates the constitution in two different places. I think it's section 28, which is safety. It's safety of girls. It's the guarantee of safety in schools, and of course there are girls who have been injured as a result of these practices. Right. And then I think it's section 31, which is about gender discrimination, and obviously this discriminates against girls because they're being denied their opportunities. So we think we've got very strong and clear grounds to overturn this, and that's what I will do as governor on day one. That is a day one thing to begin that process.
Okay. Well, if you have a plan to overturn laws, I'm going to jump around and do these sort of out of order. One of my big issues that I don't think is talked about enough on the campaign trail, probably because California is so anti-2A, is California has some of the most draconian, unconstitutional firearms policies, like 10-round magazines, the assault rifles ban, which they can't define. They just think black rifles with pistol grips are scary. So we end up with, I don't know how big of a firearms guy you are, and this is some people's concerns because they call you a UK guy, even though you've renounced your citizenship. You're an American citizen. Where is sort of your stance on assault rifle bans? You got to go through a background check to get ammo, where in other states you can order it. No,
you've got
to
people getting ammo. Even if you live, they're going across the border. I hear it the whole time. Look, I'm very strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I want to really, I do hear that concern, and I understand why people would have it. I'm very happy to address it, and I think it's one of those things where actually, I think you've got to really understand what America's all about to get the Second Amendment.
Right.
And on one level, I mean, there's many levels on which it's so important and foundational. On the one level is just practical. We're a really big country, unlike Europe, where you have very different attitude to guns and firearms generally and self-defense. And so it's just completely insane to think that if there's a threat to, what's most precious to you, your family, your property, that the police are going to be there. It may take them hours to get there. We're a big country. And actually a lot of the left who kind of push this stuff, they're so kind of cocooned in their urban environments. They just don't understand that there are many people who don't live like that. And it's just a completely scandalous thing, an offensive thing to say you can't protect yourself. That's just from a practical point of view. Right. Then there's a deeper philosophical point of view, which I love actually, and it goes to everything I believe in, which is, what does that tell you? There's an attitude below that, a value system even underpinning that, which is the principle of self-reliance, that it's a good thing that we don't rely on the government, that actually that's the great thing about America, that we don't assume that the government takes care of everything. And you can apply that principle, of course, across the board. But it's certainly in this area. Like, no, I'm responsible. It's my duty, responsibility, and as a citizen, as an American, not to just assume the government takes care of everything. So that's another principle. And then there's the really deep one, which is, of course, is the origin of the Second Amendment in the first place, which is actually the principle that we're not going to allow government tyranny and authoritarianism. And in the end, that's the real kind of basis of it, if you read it. And of course, that's a beautiful thing because it's about liberty. And I just think that is all missed in this conversation. And it's really important. And by the way, we saw in the pandemic, it's no joke. Like we really do need to guard against government tyranny. We saw that in the lockdowns. And so now you get to the politics of it and all these endless chipping away at the Second Amendment that happens in California. And I'm aware of it. And I keep, asking for specific examples. We're collecting them as a kind of, hit list of what are the things that we have to try and address. And so there's a long list, very specific. They keep chipping away. And I think that there's a broad political point to be made, which is these Democrats who endlessly go on, especially in California, news from Newsom on down, about gun violence, and we've got to stop gun violence, all this. That's not at all true. If you look at what they actually care about, and I think the thing that really brought this to a head for me, or brought this to the surface, was a bill that was put into the legislature by a friend of mine, Bill Essayli, who's now the U.S. Attorney for the Central District. President Trump put him in the Justice Department, doing a fantastic job prosecuting homeless industrial complex fraud and all that kind of stuff. But when he was in the state legislature, Bill had a bill on gun crime, and it had specific mandatory sentencing for different types of crime that were committed by carrying or using a gun during the commission of different types of crime and different degrees of severity. So if you committed a crime, you're carrying a gun, you get certain enhancement. If you fire a gun, it's an increased enhancement. If you injure someone, an increased enhancement. If you kill someone, exact gradations there, guaranteed jail time. And the Democrats blocked it. They blocked it. They don't care about gun crime or gun violence. It's gun ownership that they care about. That's what they're really against. And you could see it, and you can see that in the way they have. Right, what are we going to do about it? There's a couple of things. And again, I'll go back to Michael Gates. It's very important. I'm going to bring this up a lot because I really am putting together a team to turn around California. It's not just me. Look, all my life I've run businesses. I've worked at the highest level in the government in the UK. It's never about one person. It's about the team you put together. You see that with President Trump and how he ran in 2024. So Michael Gates, I've mentioned him a couple of times now. He was the city attorney in Huntington Beach, where I launched my campaign, because in many ways it's the symbol of the kind of fight we need in California. They took a council that was 6-1 Democrat and they turned it 7-0 Republican. And when they ran as a team, the last time around, 2024, they weren't running away from the president. They literally called themselves the Magnificent Seven. That's how they ran. And they just, went for it. And they've done, really common sense, conservative things in that city, the largest in Orange County. And Michael Gates, my running mate for Attorney General, he was the city attorney. And he was incredibly aggressive, fighting back against Newsom on everything: housing mandates, voter ID, sanctuary state law, all this stuff, right? He's a real fighter. Then he was hired by the president. He was in the Justice Department for the last year. And now he's back here. He didn't love going back and forth to Washington. He's got a large family and he wanted to spend more time with his kids. He's back here in California running with me for Attorney General. So he'll be leading this effort. For example, when we're elected, every county sheriff's department will be sent a very clear letter and expectation of their obligations under the Second Amendment with respect to things like concealed carry, that the timeline by which they're supposed to issue the permits. And of course, many counties it's a joke. They barely issue any. LA County takes 3 years and they do a handful a year. So that's a direct, be pushing for that. Then you've got my commitment to appoint, and I hope to be making an announcement on who this will be pretty soon, a gun rights ombudsman who on all of because there's so many detailed things that we need to push forward. And I want to make sure that there's a place where gun rights are really captured within the administration, and there's someone pushing forward and making sure that we do everything we can and take every opportunity. Now, some of these things are laws. Now, remember, to overturn the California law, it has to violate the California state constitution. So we're going to have to be very forensic about which of these infringements on gun rights we can actually look at in terms of California state law. But you can be absolutely certain that with me and Michael Gates and the ombudsman that we're going to be appointing, you're going to have incredibly strong pressure to roll back this assault that's happened on the Second Amendment here in California.
Okay, yeah, the concealed carry permits thing, that is something the Supreme Court already ruled that because California used to be a may issue state, meaning that you had to give a good reason in order to get a concealed carry permit. Supreme Court passed a law saying no, if somebody applies and they go through the process, you have to give them a concealed carry.
That's right.
So their way around that is to add insane fees, and they delay the process.
And the delays, exactly.
My friend, she just got hers, and it took her 2 years and like $2,000 to get her concealed carry.
I know.
You know, so I mean, you're literally pricing the middle class and lower income class out of being able to conceal carry a firearm. And they do the same thing with purchasing as well, adding these insane, it's like 20% taxes now to purchase a firearm.
Exactly. And the ammo. And also they're doing this all at a time when they've let crime explode.
Right.
So people are feeling more frightened and feel a stronger desire and need to be able to protect themselves because of their crime explosion that they've allowed to happen. And exactly as that's going on, they've made it harder and harder. It's completely outrageous.
Right. Okay. Well, I only got you for so long, so there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to ask you about. Primarily here, affordability, housing, homeless industrial complex. To me, they all sort of tie together. So like the homeless industrial, well, we'll talk about the homeless industrial complex in a second, but you hear Democrats constantly saying that we need more housing to solve homelessness. And this is an insane thought process to me because they are separate issues. The majority of the homeless are addicted or mentally ill.
Correct.
Both.
Over 80%. That's not an assertion. There are studies that have shown that real research is over 80%.
Right. So their idea is two-pronged. We need to hand out fentanyl needles and crack pipes, and then we need to give no-bid contracts to build high-rise structures in cities. And it's like, this is just, it's another high-speed rail boondoggle. It's money laundering. It's fraud. And I just sort of want to hear how you would address the homeless industrial complex and the homeless situation.
Well, you're totally right that it should be separated from the housing question. So first, it's very simple actually, and I can give you a sort of short-ish answer, and then point people if they want more to a longer answer. I'll start with that. The longer answer is a policy paper that I wrote. So one thing, just sort of context here, is that I've been working towards this for a number of years now. I started a policy organization called Golden Together about 3 years ago. It's just when I stopped doing my Fox show and just changed to being a contributor at Fox so that I could focus on California. Policy organization Golden Together. I've been traveling the state the last 3+ years, really learning about the problems, understanding what's gone wrong, talking to people, listening to Californians, and developing the solutions. And you'll see on that website at goldentogether.com, we've got policy papers on all these big issues, including on this. And there's a paper there called Ending Homelessness, so you can read that. But the short answer is it's actually pretty straightforward. It's three things. Number one, for homelessness, you've got to enforce the law. It is illegal to live on the streets. It's always been illegal. These homeless encampments are illegal. You're breaking the law when you do that. And so the first step is enforce the law. You've got to get people off the street. And for years, you've got no chance of solving the problem if people are on the street. It's just obvious common sense. You've got to remove them from the street. And for years, all these Democrats and some Republican, whatever, they've been hiding behind these court rulings. And the court, and it was, again, bullshit. I mean, I've really studied this. They hid behind this ruling. They called it the Boise ruling for Boise in Idaho. And the ruling is the Ninth Circuit. And they said, you can only remove people from the street if you've got sufficient shelter beds available for all the homeless population in your area. Right. And that's been interpreted here as meaning apartments and permanent supportive housing, all this nonsense, that $1 million a unit for this stuff that they're building, which is all going into the pockets of their crony developers.
Right.
That's the corruption. But there was no definition of shelter. It could have been a bed in a tent, that's a sort of, temporary. But they hid behind that ruling and said, oh, our hands are tied, we can't remove people. Not true. But now there's no excuse at all, because that's been overturned in a Supreme Court ruling. It's actually the year before last, Grants Pass versus Oregon. And they overturned that. So there's no hiding place. You've got to just enforce the law. And I'm very clear about it. As governor, if local politicians and whatever won't enforce the law, I will use state law enforcement resources to remove people from the streets in California, wherever they are, whatever the local government is doing or not doing. That's number one. Number two, to your point, you have to get people. You can't just where are you going to put them? You've got to get them into what they need. And that's 2 and 3. Number 2 is treatment for addiction, because over 80% have drug or alcohol addiction or mental health problems or both. And so right now we have a law that was passed in 2016 known as Housing First, which means which directs that if you're in receipt of funding for homelessness, you cannot require sobriety, or you cannot require any kind of conditions to be put on that. So they put these, and I've seen it. I've seen it on the street in Venice and elsewhere. Venice down in LA, that you've got people, and it's described to me as a second home by actual people who are trying to help get these people's lives back on track. They give them a $1 million apartment. They call it permanent supportive housing. Don't require anything in terms of getting off drugs. These people are going back on the street to deal drugs or buy drugs because they're addicts.
Well, and not to mention, one of the worst things you can do to an addict is put them alone in a room.
Exactly right. It's a disaster. So it's a complete disaster. So even some of the Democrats know this. This last session in the legislature, they passed a bill called the Sober Housing Bill, which would have taken just 10% of the money and said, well, just for 10% of it can be spent on housing or shelter that has drug or alcohol treatment connected to it, required. And the Democrat legislature with the 2/3 majority, they passed it. Newsom vetoed it. I mean, what a disgrace. So we've got to get around that. We've got to get around that. And if if it means taking money out of that system and putting it into philanthropic channels where you've got lots of faith-based, community-based organizations that are doing the real work to get people off drugs and alcohol. So that's the second thing, right? You've got to get treatment and make it mandatory. You've got to have people get their lives back on track. And then the third one is mental health, where we don't have enough mental health beds, massively underprovided. So you go to, I'm on the road the whole time, and you talk to sheriffs, whatever. This is a real example. This, I think, was Sonoma County. The sheriff there said to me, half the people in his jails, half have severe mental health problems. That's where we're actually treating people with mental health. It's barbaric.
Right.
Why? Because they put the money into this corrupt, homeless industrial complex. There's plenty of money, but it's not gone to the actual services that you need, including what Newsom passed as his flagship homelessness thing in March 24, which was and all this nonsense, nothing that actually gets people the treatment that they need. Then you have Prop 36, which we passed overwhelmingly in California. That was supposed to put more money into mental health. They haven't done that. And so there's money there that needs to be put into it. And there's a further specific thing that's very important people understand, which is one of these ridiculous. I remember I've worked inside of a government. I know how it works. All of these, you've got to understand these bureaucratic things that you've got to fix in order to solve a problem. And one huge problem is Medicaid, because a lot of this is low-income people that we're talking about. So it's all the funding flows, which in government, it's all about the funding. That determines what happens. The funding flows often through Medicaid, because it's low-income people. Medicaid has a rule that's been in place since it was set up in the 60s called the IMD rule, Institutions of Mental Disease. And the IMD rule, which was written at a time all very utopian, we don't want mental institutions, we don't want insane asylums, it's all very we don't want any of that. So they have a rule which is that you don't get reimbursement states are not reimbursed for any mental health facility with more than 16 beds. It's a really specific limit, 16 beds. Now, imagine if we had that for just healthcare generally, that no hospital could be bigger than 16 beds. Imagine how inefficient that would be. That's what's going on with mental health when it comes to Medicaid. Now, the first Trump administration actually created a waiver. It's called the IMD waiver that states could apply for. Well, guess what? The geniuses in California haven't applied for it. So, there's all these things we can, of course I would. So there's all these things that you can do to actually get the money to where it's needed. And it's also, 3 steps: enforce the law, get people treatment, massively increase mental health capacity. And then you can truly solve the problem. This shouldn't exist, right? It's unacceptable. They always put it, we would never allow people we love to live in those conditions. So why do we tolerate this? And you don't see it anywhere else. It shames us. That's why the policy report I wrote is called Ending Homelessness, because we should be able to do it. And that's exactly will be my attitude as governor.
And it's just as insidious as the gender affirming care thing. They call it harm reduction, or the safe injection sites and handing out all the materials.
All of that ideological nonsense has to go. It's got to be practical things to get people off the streets and get their lives back on track. That's it. By the way, Huntington Beach, and this is not some crazy, oh my gosh, how are you going to do that? Huntington Beach did it. That council I talked to, they reduced homelessness by 60% just in a couple of years by doing this kind of thing.
With all of the laws that are stacked against them.
Exactly.
And you take, what was it, $24 billion that they couldn't account for in the last 5 years?
Yes, that was the state auditor. So the state auditor report, again, it was a Republican member of the assembly that asked for this to be done. The state auditor did a report, $24 billion. That's
right.
Bigger than a lot of states' budgets total. And they couldn't spend, and they couldn't find where it went. And then again, they said the legislature said, we want a full detailed audit to find where it went. Newsom vetoed that. They passed. It's amazing when you actually look at what he's done. They passed, again, the Democrat-controlled legislature passed a bill in response to that 24 billion number and said, because the audit didn't say where it just said, we can't find it, we don't know. And so they said, well, we want to know. We want a full detailed audit. And they passed a bill to do it. And Newsom vetoed it.
Yeah, they're doing the same thing with the high-speed rail. They don't want to know where.
Well, why? Because we know. Well, why else would you veto it other than guilty? Because you know that your corrupt donors are pocketing a lot of this cash.
100%. I mean, you got the Shangri-La guy.
Well, sorry, they're not. The donors aren't. The donors are just doing what they should. They're just it's the politics. Your corruption is what they're trying to hide.
Well, and the NGOs as well.
Exactly.
You had the Project Home Key thing that was supposed to take dilapidated hotels and renovate them and turn them into, affordable housing for the homeless. And then you got, the guy from Shangri-La who's paying off his AMX bill, buying a Maserati or whatever, and flying to Tahiti or God knows where.
Yeah, there's so much of this. It's disgusting. And this is what, it's a classic. This is what you get with one-party rule. It's now 16 years of one-party rule. They get totally complacent, totally arrogant and corrupt. They think that they can get away with anything because they kind of have got away with anything. The media are complicit in all this. They don't really dig in. That's why the California Post was just chatting just before I came on that I just had to a little bit late because I had to respond to a story that they're doing. Really big deal that we've now got a really aggressive media outlet that's holding these people accountable in California. It hasn't happened for years, and this is the corruption of one-party rule, and this has been going on and on and on, and it's disgusting. And it's they're stealing taxpayer money, and you hear these non-profit leaders. This is the homeless industrial complex. It's basically the politicians, the affordable permanent supportive housing developers. That's a racket that you got. They're in on the thing, and the non-profit leaders. You got people. In LA, I was being told stories. These non-profit leaders paid, on the CEO of 2 separate ones, taking home a salary of $1 million for each one. Mm-hmm. The other corruption that goes we could talk all show just about this. In LA, for example, they keep passing these taxes. So they passed a sales tax increase. I think it was sorry, it was the mansion. I mean, they are also raising the sales tax for other things. They passed a mansion tax increase that was like a tax on. Expensive homes, not that expensive because housing has gone up so much. And The people who put it on the ballot, who paid to get the signatures to get it on the ballot in LA, are the beneficiaries of the ballot initiative. So they literally pay to put a tax on Angelinos, and the tax revenue goes back to them. It's just unbelievable, the corruption.
Yeah, and so the housing part of this. So
Yes.
they try to conflate the two issues, which it actually frustrates me because I'm 42 years old. I was born and raised in California, raised in San Jose, born in Los Gatos. I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains here.
Yeah.
No matter how much I make good money, I make around $110,000 a year. You would think that I would own my own home. You'd think I'd be able to own my own home, but no matter how much of a raise I get, the cost of living just keeps jumping.
Well, it's.
more and
I'm
more.
not just tell you. I mean, you say that, and that's right. You'd think in any normal world. I don't know the latest number. The last time I looked at it, there were 6 counties in California where literally an income level of 100,000 was for the purposes of their official, data and welfare payments and whatever, classified as low income.
It's under 108.
100,000.
It's under 108,000 here in the county that I live in.
Right. Well, there you are. I mean, it's just insane, and it's the cost of living, which is entirely driven by their policy agenda. That's what it's. It's nothing else.
Well, and one of the things that it took me a long time to realize this with housing, it's sort of a catch-22 because you have a ton of homeowners in California. And one of the primary reasons you buy a home is because it increases equity. So, that's one of the main reasons. The thing is, if you build more homes and you have more supply on the market, housing values aren't going to go up, or they may even go down because you have more inventory now. And I mean, Trump actually just talked about this. He was like, we want to protect the equity of homeowners, but at the same time, we want to make housing more affordable. Well, it's like, you can't really.
Well, I don't know about that.
both.
I've got to wade through that. Let me just talk to this. I spent a lot of time, and in fact, housing was the first issue. Housing, not homelessness, but housing that I really looked at when I was getting in. Because remember that most of my career has been either in business. I've started various types of worked in business, started companies. My first job was project manager for a construction company. So I know this. I care about this very much. It's in my blood. My stepfather worked construction. I used to go out and literally build houses, help with that. So, and most of my career I've been doing things, working in business, starting my own companies, including restaurants back in the day in England, or working for a while in the government trying to make change happen. So for all those years that I was a host of a TV show, it was which I loved. It was an amazing opportunity to host a show on Fox News on Sunday nights. But it was increasingly, I wanted to get back to doing things, not just talking about things. And the first issue I looked at was housing. And in fact, I tried to get a ballot initiative on the statewide ballot to deal with some of the things that are driving up housing costs. But to this specific point of the values I don't really. There's a couple of things we need to say. It is true that there's a sort of basic supply and demand thing going on, and that's one of the reasons why one of the main drivers of the high housing costs, and high housing costs, highest in the country. One of the main reasons people are leaving California, including young people, the exact people we want to stay here, we're going to sort of build the future, raise families here, start businesses, do amazing things, and they're being driven out. Now, there's a couple of things we need to say. First of all, we wouldn't have such a supply-demand problem and a housing crisis were it not for 2 factors. Number one, illegal immigration. So you've got a lot of people here who shouldn't be here. And so that obviously impacts the housing supply and demand equation.
And the H-1B situation in big tech as well.
Right. And then you have another thing which isn't talked about enough, which is renting, where you've got all these rent controls, all these things, tenants' rights, and everything gone so far in that direction that you've got. I mean, the last time again I looked at the data, it was definitely over 1 million empty properties in California, empty units. Now, of course, some of them are second homes and whatever, and I don't begrudge that. People do well. Good luck. It's America. We want you to do well. As long as everyone has the chance to climb the ladder of opportunity, good luck to you. But if you if you didn't have these restrictions on renting and protections for tenants that have gone way too far in the other direction, you'd free up more units for rent. That's just a fact that I'd want to look at. But even with all of that being said, I think we should be building more, because in California, how have we grown? If you think back to the golden age of California, the California dream, it's all about that that lifestyle, the single family home lifestyle. And that's what-
1,500 square feet, backyard,
Right.
front yard, 2-car garage. Yeah.
That's what California is. Okay, and it's different to New York or London, wherever. It's just that's what we are. And I've always believed you've got to go with the grain of human nature and what people want. That's what you want in California. And so right now there's a war on single family homes. You can't build single. They make it incredibly difficult with all these ridiculous bureaucratic restrictions. They, endless of them. VMT, vehicle miles traveled. If you build single families, more driving. That's terrible. I don't even want to bore everyone with the details. Right? There's
Well,
basically
the materials they force. Yeah.
endless things, right? And one of the main driving things underlying this housing crisis is the left's climate crusade, and they want everyone. There's this vision of everyone living in apartments in urban density, no cars, walking, cycling, public transit. This is what they want. And so all of these policy things are driving in that direction. And then I have to say, first of all, if you go any further, is that how they live? The people pushing this nonsense. Right. Is that how, does Gavin Newsom live in an apartment? Does Nancy Pelosi, now, well-earned retirement, is she going to be trundling around San Francisco on transit? Of course not. It's total elitism. They don't live like that. They have their nice houses with the yard and all the rest of it and the swimming pool, but they don't want the sort of little people to do that. They're going to shove everyone in boxes in apartments. So it's just disgusting elitism. That's the first point. Second point, they talk about density. Well, if you look up the numbers, and there's varying, like I was actually with the Building Industry Association the other day, and I always cite the number of, well, it's still, whatever your exact number, I'm going to say the percentage of our land that's developed in California is the lowest in the country. In other words, we have the highest density. The number I used to cite is 5%. They say it's 6%, 6.6 or something. But whether it depends whether you include roads and all this kind of stuff. It's still the lowest in the country. And so there's plenty of land. Like we did a back of the envelope calculation for this policy report on housing that you can read at goldentogether.com, which is that if you increased the proportion of our land that was built on by 1%, we'd still be pretty much the lowest in the country. In other words, the highest density in the country, but there would be room for 10 million new single family homes on quarter-acre lots. We have so much space. I'm on the road the whole time in California, and this is not about ruining our beautiful open spaces that I love and our state parks and wilderness.
Right.
Of course not. I love that. I'm a huge environmentalist in the old-fashioned sense of conservation and loving nature. And I love our farmers and the Central Valley. I'm there all the time, and I want to protect our farmland, and it makes me sick that farmland's being ripped out, the most fertile farmland in the world, and replaced with solar farms or even housing developments. But there's so much space to build where there's nothing, and and so we've got to kind of fight that ideology of density. That's one thing. And then you get into all these specific things that make it so expensive, just as you touched on. The building materials. I mean, the big part of that is that we're not foresting timber hardly anymore in California. We used to get most of it from our own forests. Now, because there is really extreme environmentalism, we're not managing the forest properly. We're not taking timber out. Our lumber industry has been decimated, and that's causing problems in rural communities up in the Sierras and whatever. But we're still using it. We're now trucking it in from Oregon and Canada. It's insane. So you've got materials costs, you've got building codes that get more and more onerous every single year with ridiculous layers of, it's all driven by climate, right? You've got to do this, you've got to do that, endless bullshit. And the process, the environment, the reviews and the engineering reports, all this kind of bureaucracy that's been layered on. And then on top of that, you've got impact fees. That's another thing no one knows about. Developer impact fees, which are basically a tax on housing that is paid by the house builder. And obviously it goes into the price. The Turner Center at Berkeley, which is like, they compile all this data on housing. They estimate that now it's up to 20% of the price of a house is fees. Which is basically taxes. And it used to be that it's a couple of grand here and there and helps pay for the park or whatever. By the way, you already pay local taxes to pay for that stuff. Now it's just off the charts. One of my my ballot initiative was to cap impact fees at 3% of the construction cost. Often it's like 20%, so whatever. I could go on and on. I'm sorry. I'm just...
No, it's fine. Like Adam Carolla is doing a lot of coverage of what you're talking about right now. And it's not just the fees. It's the amount of time it takes for them to approve fees.
Exactly right.
You said so many things there that could take it in like one or two directions, but like what you said about the the lumber industry. Like I lived in San Lorenzo Valley up here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and that is originally a logging town. And then they made it like it is a sin against God to cut down a redwood tree. Right. And then in 2020, we had these massive
terrible fires. Exactly.
And I lived through them. I was evacuated for 5 weeks. And of course, so I had to go rent a hotel, and they're charging $200 a night. It was a nightmare. That was a nightmare.
It's so sad. We used to go camping a lot in Big Basin.
That's what burned down.
Right.
I lived right down the street from there. I run there all the time.
Wow.
I grew up going to Big Basin.
When we first moved here with the boys, we go camping up there, and you love that. You get up there and you drive in, and it's just magnificent.
Yeah, and the old cabin that they had,
right.
That's gone. It's getting better. It's opening back up, but you still can't. Luckily, I mean, I don't want to make any of this about me, but I was fortunate enough to run the Skyline Big Basin to the Sea Trail down past Berry Creek Falls 2 weeks before those fires.
Oh my goodness!
That was those fires were probably like the most difficult time of my life. I was going through a lot.
Imagine.
Right in the middle
of.
No, my house didn't burn down. I'm renting, but it was a night. I have friends that lost their homes, and one of them didn't rebuild. You know what? I met a guy at the laundromat. And it was right after the fires, maybe 6 weeks after they lifted the evacuation orders. And I started talking to him and, just shooting the shit. And he tells me, it's like, yeah, my house burned down. Me and my daughter are living out of an RV at Costco right now. And I have to try not to get choked up when I tell the story, because he starts telling me a story about how much red tape he's dealing with to be able to rebuild his house. And he was like, they cleared the property so I can get back on the property, but they won't allow me to bring my RV back onto the property to build a house. And he bursts into tears and he says, all I want to do is give my daughter her own bedroom. And it's all because he's dealing with this bureaucratic nonsense.
Exactly.
And it's his own property. But so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the fires, but we only got 10 minutes left. So I do want to talk to you about what you brought up with the environmentalism. And there's a very specific thing that I wanted to, I don't hear anybody talking about this. And this is the offshore wind project.
Oh my God, I talk about it the whole time. Are you kidding? It's my favorite example of their insanity.
It's going to dwarf the boondoggle of the high-speed rail.
I know.
And it's
so outrageous. And and again, one of my favorite parts of the state, Morro Bay, Cambria, beautiful. We love going there. You've got these amazing for anyone who's got kids that likes sort of outdoor stuff. If you go down to Morro Bay, just on it's Los Osos, I think, is the town there. And you've got these amazing dunes, sand dunes, and you can get bits of cardboard boxes or boogie boards if you want, and just go it's so fun. These really steep dunes, and you can have such fun surfing the sand dunes. It's fantastic. We love that part. And they're going to destroy it with these massive offshore wind farms that these women, just so people understand, it sounds like you've done the work as well. And they're up in Humboldt, beautiful Humboldt.
Right, same thing.
And and this is the insane scheme that they've got, which is that they're going to be, I think it's 20 miles offshore, isn't it? Because the wind is, and that means, and then to get a lot of the wind, they're going to make them tall, right? Mm-hmm. And so these are 1,000 feet high. That's the plan. But because it's so far out, it's very deep, the ocean there, the shelf drops off. So they're going to be floating. This is the idea. Floating windmills, 1,000 feet high is the height of the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
And they have 10,000 Eiffel Towers floating. It's never been done before. This has never been done. And the industrialization that would bring to the Central Coast and the Northern Coast, and this is from environmentalists. It's
exactly.
Just unbelievable.
This became a huge issue for me. I ran for state senate back in 2022 against John Laird. I did horrible, but this became a huge issue of mine that I didn't even realize was going on. And I met with the city councilor out there in Morro Bay, and she starts telling me, just purely from the environmental perspective, you're going to turn Morro Bay into an industrialized, that little slough that they have. It's like a little inlet.
Yes.
That's going to be filled with these gigantic ships that need to service these windmills. Yes. Not to mention what it does to the whales, what it does to dolphins and other marine life. But right there at the point, towards what's that castle called?
Hearst Castle.
Castle. So there's like a point, a little bit south of Hearst Castle right before
where
you
there's
get
a
into
bunch
Mo
of,
Bay.
by the way, beautiful elephant seals there. It's an amazing hike. You can go along the coast.
But it's also an annual bird migration path. And they're
Right.
planning on putting the windmills right there. So
It's just disgusting.
and they call themselves the green energy people call themselves environmentalists.
Yeah.
And
No, I'm so glad you brought it up. I feel so strongly about it. I'm so excited about stopping this. Like in its, we absolutely cannot let this happen. And it's so expensive. It doesn't even say, it's just so bad on every level.
yeah, and like you said, they're going to be floating. They're not even going to bury the power lines. They're going to be daisy chained together,
Yes.
just like free floating. Ships are going to get caught up in them. Then they have these huge battery platforms that they're going to have to build that converts it from AC to DC, so they can have these giant battery platforms, and they need to be cooled by seawater, and it drops the warmer water back down into the colder water. It's from
Wait, tell me that, because actually you're this is really useful for me, because it sounds like, am I wrong when I say they're 20 miles offshore and that's why they have to be floating?
I think that's what they're planning on doing out in Humboldt, but in Morro Bay, it's going to be closer in.
But they're still floating.
Some of them are going to be, I think the ones in Morro Bay, and I'll have to double check on this for you. I think the ones in Morro Bay are going to be into the ground, but the ones out in Humboldt, I believe, are going to be floating.
And
But
tell me about the battery. I haven't heard about that.
so the way to store all the energy, they got to store it in giant batteries. So
Yeah.
they're going to build these platforms that ironically look just like oil platforms. And
What, in the ocean?
in the ocean. And because they have to have these, the battery packs are going to be on land, but they have to have these big giant AC to DC converters that convert the power. And they're going to be these huge platforms that look like oil platforms, and they're going to need to water cool the mechanical devices that are on it. And they take the seawater, they cool the devices, and then they drop it right back down. And and they're not even talking about like the lifespan of these windmills. But like the windmills on land last 20, 25 years.
Yeah, and then and some of them, I was out in Solano County, where they're building that new California Forever, the new development there, and they got these windmills that keep catching fire.
Oh yeah, and
they
what
burn
happens?
out, and then you can't get rid of them, and there's this sort of windmill graveyards where they're just piled up and never degrade. It's just unbelievable.
But they're also filled with gear oil. So if any of these happen out in the ocean, like you're not talking about making it safer in terms of not having oil spills or anything like that, because the sheer quantity that you're going to have of them, and like the 20-year lifespan that I talked about, cut that in half, maybe even less for ones that are going to be on the ocean, because anybody that has lived on the coast knows what happens.
Yeah.
How often you have to paint your house.
Yeah.
And also what it does to gears, like the things are spinning, so like they're mechanical devices that it's just going to be a sandblaster on them all day long. It's an insane idea. And what's hilarious is Gavin tries to spin it as, oh, we're going against big oil. Well, who do you think the biggest bidders on these projects are? BP and Shell.
Oh, really?
They're the ones that want to build these things. I got highly informed. There's a guy named Michael Hogan, who's a scientist out here in Monterey. There's some people I should probably put you in contact
Please,
with.
I'm obsessed with this, obsessed with stopping it. And again, I want to come back to, okay, what can you do? Well, and actually, I know we're going to run out of time, but it's a really important point for people saying, well, and we haven't even got into how I think I can win as a Republican and all that. So I think I can. It's going to be difficult, but I think I can do it. And then the next question, well, even if you win, Steve, what can you do? Because you've got the state legislature, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you know what you're doing and you understand how things work, you can use the executive branch very powerfully. And a whole bunch of these nightmare things on every issue that's driving up the cost and hassle of doing anything in California and life here is coming out of these bureaucratic agencies. And the governor appoints people to these agencies, the leadership and all the way down. So all of these relevant, the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, there's a whole bunch of these ridiculous bureaucracies. And by the way, we got too many of them.
Sierra Club.
Well, there's a revolving door between these activist environmental groups, these far left environmental groups, like the Sierra Club, like the Natural Resources Defense Council, whose names are very nice, but have turned into these sort of nightmare left, sort of what they used to in Europe call red green, leftist green. And they infill. There's a revolving door between them and the regulators, and they have this whole technique of suing them. So, and then they settle. So there's a whole thing that goes on where let's say, the politicians put something forward, a legislative thing or whatever, and then these green groups don't think it goes far enough, so they sue the government, but they've put their own people inside these agencies in the legal departments who then settle. And there's this whole ratchet of going further and further and more extreme. That's a whole thing that we need to unpack, fire those people, get common sense people in there. Anyway, the point I'm making is with appointments to these agencies and commissions, you can stop this stuff. You really can. You can both change the incentive structure in terms of why all policy is moving in that direction, and you can kill these specific projects, which is what I will do. And then the final thing I'll say on that is like, well, what do we positively do? Because we're going to need electricity and we need energy, and then I want us to have abundant energy. Well, it's very simple. What you kill wind, which makes no sense. You stop the subsidies for solar. I'm not against solar, but we shouldn't be subsidizing it. They keep telling us that solar is cheaper now, only because they don't include the price of the batteries. They don't include the cost, because just like with wind, you need batteries to make the whole thing work, because the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day, except in space, which Elon is going to make sure we have for the data centers. Maybe that changes this equation. And then you have the transmission lines from these solar plants that they're building all over the place. They don't account for any of that. So we're going to kill wind, end the solar subsidies, and use natural gas to power our electric grid. We have abundant natural gas in California to produce electricity. We have a whole fleet, as they call it, of natural gas-fired power stations. They are running right now at 10 to 15% of their capacity. Why? Because of the war on fossil fuels. And so they basically are using our gas-fired power stations, which are perfectly good, as backup for wind and solar, which is insane. So especially when you consider that we have abundant reserves of natural gas right here in California. But just as with oil, which is why gas prices are the highest in the country, we're not using what we have in California. Instead, we're importing it from halfway around the world in the name of climate, importing 90% of the natural gas that we use. Total insanity.
Geothermal as well.
Geothermal, they don't even count as, well, and the other one is hydropower. They don't even count as renewable.
Right.
I mean, it's just in their stupid calculations. These people are just off the charts, insane. But we're going to use natural gas. We're going to use our gas-fired power stations as a bridge to nuclear. I do believe in nuclear power. I think we want to get there, but that takes a longer time. And in the meantime, we've got a perfectly good source of affordable, reliable energy, which is natural gas, and that's what we're going to use. And we're going to kill off all this nonsense.
Well, Steve, I got to say I am very impressed with a lot of stuff that you have to say, and I'm more impressed that you're willing to just take any question and just off the top of your head. You don't have some pre-scripted canned answers like all these other politicians. And I enjoy.
This is what I enjoy. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've got to tell you, I'd love to do a part 2. I really mean it.
I would love to too.
Just as you've just seen, I've learned from the conversation, which I love.
Well, awesome, because I didn't even get to talk to you about the sanctuary state stuff. So
no, exactly. You've got a lot. Definitely, let's do a part 2.
Okay, awesome. Really quick, any last words, messages to people that are watching, and where can people find you?
Yeah, just to let's get into it. Next time we should talk about the politics, because all this is very nice, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't win the actual election. Right. And so we should get into that, because I've got a very strong point of view about how we actually pull this off and how I win as a Republican in California, which as I say, I think it's possible. It's very difficult. I'm not assuming that it's going to be a walk in the park, but it's not impossible. And that's why we've got to go for it. And I'm really going for it full on with every kind of everything I can do, both in terms of energy and creativity and work rate and all of those things have to be right. So I think we can do this. We should talk about that next time. In the meantime, follow me on social media at Steve Hilton X. We're putting out a lot of stuff all the time. And if you want to get involved in the campaign, stevehiltonforgovernor.com, FOR, stevehiltonforgovernor.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Steve. I'll email your team, and maybe we'll do a second round.
I'd love that. Thank you so much. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
See you later. Cheers.
Bye. Yeah, and you can just drop off whenever, Steve. I'm gonna keep chatting with the chat here. So thanks again. All right, folks. I know I didn't get to do a lot of your questions here in the chat, but I have half of the stuff written out that I didn't get to talk to him about. I wanted to talk to him about healthcare. I wanted to talk to him about sanctuary state policies. I didn't even get to, I could have done a whole episode just on firearms policies, because if you guys can't tell, I'm sort of a gun guy. So Tracy, I got your parental rights stuff. No, I didn't ask him the last question that you wanted me to ask him because it did not seem highly important compared to all the other things I wanted to talk to him about. I wanted to talk to him about water infrastructure. I wanted to talk to him about the gas tax. I wanted to talk to him about turning carpool lanes into toll lanes, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, we'll get to that on round 2. I'm pretty sure we'll have another one. So I'll tell you what, Tracy, next time, no, I'm not kidding you. Next time, I'll actually see if Steve wants to address the chat directly. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that I didn't get to. So thank you guys for all hanging out. Man, the chat was lively tonight. So I will be back tomorrow actually with it's almost going to look like I'm running some sort of op for Steve, because tomorrow night I have a gentleman on named Vem Miller who has a very different who has a story to tell about what happened to him. Shannon, do you think you'll get Chad on? I've emailed with them, and at first he said he sort of alluded to that he'd be interested in doing it, but he's sort of dropped off the map. He isn't responding to my messages or emails. So I don't know. I'm going to try to get him on, but he may not want to come on after the episode that I do tomorrow night, because I don't hate Chad Bianco. I don't have anything personal against him, but there's definitely something that he did that gives me great cause for concern. And I'll just talk about it really quick. If you guys all remember the assassination attempt on Trump's life, right? Over at Butler with Thomas Crooks. And then you guys remember the second would-be assassin that sort of stalked him outside of his golf course in Florida. Well, if you guys remember, there was a Coachella rally that Trump did. And during the rally or before the rally, big news broke that they caught a third would-be assassin. And that was the story of the night, that they caught a third would-be assassin. Well, it turns out that entire story was bullshit. And it was actually a guy that knows people that I'm friends with. And I wasn't aware of it until my buddy Harrison Tinsley told me about this. And he put me in contact with him. And he's been on the Jimmy Dore show. And the guy showed up outside of the Trump rally, like a mile and a half away. And he had his concealed carry permit, and he was very transparent. He told the officers directly, like, hey, I got firearms in the back of my trunk. They're locked up. They're stored safely. Just want to be fully transparent with you guys. How should we handle this? And they arrested him. Well, I don't even know if they arrested him, but Bianco went on TV and talked about how we got the third would-be Trump assassin. And all the dude did was have firearms in his trunk, which is fully within our rights to have. And yeah, they railroaded him. So other than, taking the knee for BLM, which he says he didn't do, but you look at the footage and listen to what he was saying, and it sure seems that that's what he did. So I have some issues, and I want to get Vem Miller's side of this. So he'll be on tomorrow night to talk about exactly what happened. And Chad Bianco may not want to come on after I have that conversation with him. I'll still ask him. I also want to get Matt Mahan on, because if there's going to be, if it came down to one Democrat and it came down to one Republican, I would prefer we have the best to choose from. And of the Democrats, and I'm not saying that, I fully endorse the guy, because I don't. Matt Mahan of the Democrats seems to be the one that's the most moderate and reasonable, though I disagree with him on very many things. I would like to see on the final election choosing between Steve Hilton and Matt Mahan. So I guess that is actually my endorsement of Steve Hilton. I know Chad Bianco is getting a lot of backing from the Republican Party, but from the conversations I've had, from the interviews that I've seen Steve do, and the willingness to answer questions and talk about things directly and not just have we need to reduce taxes and just catchphrases, Steve Hilton seems like the much more genuine person to back. And so that's who I'm backing. I'm backing Steve Hilton. So yeah, that's kind of all I got. Usually I tell everybody in the chat, thank you, but there's so many of you guys tonight that I'm not going to be able to address all of you guys by name, but thank you everybody for being here. Before we get out of here, if you guys are veterans to the show, you know how we do it. We got to read a joke from the greatest book about Chuck Norris, or greatest book ever written, The Truth About Chuck Norris. And this is the sequel called Chuck Norris Cannot Be Stopped. You know the rules. I open the book, I let my eyes go to a joke, and I read it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Here's the Chuck Norris joke of the evening. Chuck Norris makes his internal organs pay rent. And on that note, stay Cali-based.